You know, this week I'm actually going to go against the current. The current that has been against the housing plan, the housing tariff, and things like that. And the reason I'm going to go against it is because I live in Kenya. I live in this here republic. And in this republic, a lot of us spend close to half of our earnings on paying rent. Yes, we do. Today, a house in Lavington, 3 bedrooms, you'd be lucky to get it at 80,000 shillings a month. 80,000 shillings a month in a country where less than 1% earns 100,000 shillings a month. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. If you look at the middle class in Nairobi, most of them, including you who's watching me, when you dream of a house, it is in Kitengela, at the river, almost close to Naivasha, to be able to afford the land and the house upon which you will build. Now, something is wrong. Something is broken. Housing in this country is too expensive. It is expensive not just in terms of renting, because I will tell you, most of us cannot even imagine renting a house in Runda, in Karen, or even Lavington, or Kileleshwa, or Kilimani. That's the truth. The reason why there's traffic in Umoja, and not just traffic, but also our sewage gets backed up in Umoja, is you've got too many human beings who cannot afford to live in a better place. So we are stuck in traffic, and our refuse is stuck in refuse traffic too. That's the problem. So let's be real. Kenya needs to look at its housing problem and solve it. Now, it is not just a Kenyan problem. In Hong Kong, for example, people pay for a place that can hardly fit a bed so that they can sleep, and pay thousands of dollars to live in such a place. The same is true in New York. The same is true in Tokyo. Now, why do I give these examples? We need to understand one thing. There's something within a country called disproportionate growth, where you find that in cities, there's a lot more growth. The GDP is more centered in cities. So you've got a lot more people living in cities, but the cost of living keeps increasing at a rate which the wages cannot keep up with. And that's what it is in Nairobi. Listen, anyone who's done economics will tell you, you should not spend more than 10% at max 20% of your income on rent. Yes, I'm telling you the truth. If you earn 100,000, your rent should be 10,000. Now tell me, if you earn 100,000 and your rent is 10,000, isn't 10,000 a slum? Where is a 1-bedroomed comfortable house for 10,000 shillings? But if you earn 100,000 shillings in Nairobi, you at least have a wife, a husband, or children. Where are you going to find a house for 10,000? It's impossible. Not even in Kitengela, not even in Rongai. As far as you want to go within the greater metropolitan area of Nairobi, you will not be able to afford a house. Now, this phenomenon is not just a Kenyan phenomenon. Throughout Europe, cities like Paris, London, and in Asia, Tokyo, which I'll speak to in a bit, or in the United States, New York, the cost of living, the cost of having a house has shot through the roof. The question then becomes, how does a country that is looking towards the future, as Kenya is, deal with the issue of housing? There are 2 questions to answer about housing. 1 is owning. 2 is renting. How do we bring those costs down? Pause. Let me go to Japan. Do you know that the economy of Tokyo as a city depending on you who you ask, is between 1.5 trillion US dollars to 2.5 trillion US dollars. And you ask me, why isn't the figure stationary? Why don't we have a specific figure? The reason we don't have a specific figure is because the definition of the boundaries of Tokyo are no longer fixed. Just like Nairobi, it has gone into the neighboring prefectures and has actually usurped them. The same way Nairobians live in Rongai and call it Nairobi. We live in Ngong and call it Nairobi. Live in Syokimau and Athi River and call it Nairobi. And throughout the greater metropolitan area of Nairobi has kept expanding, similar to the situation in Tokyo. Now, Tokyo, what has happened? The rents are so high, that people live in houses no bigger than the room I'm doing this production from. And they'll pay thousands of US dollars. Can you imagine paying 145,000 shillings for a 6 meter by 6 meter house? We think it's unimaginable. But I can tell you that that's where Nairobi and many cities are headed. The cost of housing in the city has gone beyond what we should expect, dream, or imagine. And this is why you jump over puddles, sewage, and flooding streets to get to your house. Not because you want to stay there, because you have a village home. You have a home in the village. 80%, if not 90% of Kenyans can go back to their village and have an acre for a compound and a single cow to milk. The reason we are all cramming in the city of Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret, Nakuru, and all those cities is because the revenues we can make within our cities are higher than what we can make in our villages. That's how it is. Now, Kenya is not an island state. It's not like Hong Kong. So our excuse is not lack of space. Our reason is urbanization. That's the problem. That's why you and I pay more rent as compared to our income than anyone else in East Africa. Now, it's an issue we need to address. Why do we need to address it? We need to address it because there is something called capital. If you're going to build a people out of poverty, they need to have the capacity to build capital. What is the most important capital a family can have? Housing. If today we reduced what you pay for rent for the same size of housing by 50%, in 20 years you will be richer than you are today. I've said this before, so let me give you an example. Between 1920 to 1940, the United States disproportionately gave housing to white people, affordable housing to white people, than it did to black people. They looked at families that got that housing and black people who didn't. And those guys were sometimes up to 10 times richer than the black people. Now, you doubt me? Let's do you a favor. Take your rent. Let's say you pay 30,000 rent. Per year, 30,000 times 12 is 360,000 shillings. 360. If we made that rent half, you will save 180,000 shillings a year. 180,000 shillings a year is fees, not for a primary school kid, not for a high school kid, not even for a campus student who got accepted into public universities. 180,000 is a parallel university student and you will still have change to pay for accommodation. 180,000 shillings is enough to change your life. And that is true for the person who pays 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. If we could reduce your rent by half, you would be wealthier by a significant margin. And if you're wealthier, let me tell you what happens. Even if you're the most careless person and you will not spend this money on serious issues, you will spend money in the economy. Whether you will go to the bar, whether you will buy a luxury car, whether you will buy the finest clothes, that money will go into the economy and support businesses. This is how serious this matter is. It's not just about you. It's about the future of this country. The rate of land costs, rental costs, mortgage costs have risen in this country. Now, let me talk about, so that was rent. Let me talk about mortgaging. If you were to take a mortgage in this country at 20% for 25 years, if your house was costing 10 million, you will pay 22 million shillings back in 25 years for that same house. So many of us don't mortgage. Many of us find a way of either paying cash or taking a circle loan to own a house. We are so used to it, we don't think it is weird. If you go to the United States, where the highest mortgage rate is 6%, it changes everything. 6% means that instead of paying 200,000 shillings a month for a 20 million shillings mortgage, you will pay 100,000 shillings a month. 100,000. That is 100,000 difference. 100,000. Think about it. 100,000 can change your life. So mortgages in this country are unaffordable. So those of us who are employed, permanent and pensionable, also find themselves priced out of a commercial mortgage. So the people in mortgages that work are people who have localized mortgages. What do I mean by localized? Your employer, your firm has decided to create a mortgage where you're paying 6%, 5%, 8%. And that's why you can afford it. We are being priced out of existence. If you watch Tom and Jerry, in as far as affording housing is concerned, you are Jerry. And the prices we are paying are Tom. And every time it's seeking to slap you in the face. And now, unfortunately, this is not a cartoon. In the game of cat and mouse, the mouse always loses. So you, my dear friend, are a mouse caught in a rat race, caught in a Ferris wheel, running as fast as you can, unable to escape poverty because you cannot afford rent. Telling you the truth. If a middle-class working person was to escape poverty, what we need is to find a way to create affordable housing. That is the key. I look at the people surrounding me. Most of them are below 30. They have a 0 to none chance to afford a house if things keep going the way they are. So let me throw in another ingredient. The other ingredient is Kenya is an extremely corrupt country, and our corrupt people are lazy. When someone steals 1 billion shillings, 10 billion shillings, or 100 billion shillings, what they do, all of them is invest in real estate. Meaning the cost of land keeps going up and the cost of real estate keeps going up. When Somalis decide to capture a European vessel off of the shores of Somalia and they make a few $1 million, what do? They come to South B, South C, and they buy land. And they make the land in South B, South C more expensive. So the question is, are you a pirate? If you're like me, no, you're not. So we are not going to afford this. if it keeps on going this way. So our government made a decision. Not just the William Ruto government, the Uhuru government as well. They made a decision to make affordable housing, and it had two phases. Phase number one was a contribution towards making housing available, and it had two main prongs. Number one, that the government was going to make land available to developers to develop housing. Now, this is a key factor because if you live in Nairobi like I do, the closer you get to the CBD, the more expensive land is. An acre in Karen today is 50 million shillings. An acre, 50 million. My dear friends, I come from the slopes of Mount Elgon in Bungoma. If you were to spend 50 million shillings on land, my friend, the local witch doctor will have to be consulted because the magic you are doing is greater than all the villages. Because 50 million is unimaginable for most of us. But that's an acre in Karen. Upper Hill is worse. An acre in Upper Hill, my dear friends, goes for 1 billion shillings. 1 billion. You, my dear friend, when you go and sleep your wildest dream, you don't pass 20 million. So you tell me, how are we going to afford all these things? Someone has to intervene. So the plan for the government was simple. The government provides land upon which developers can build, and then two things happen. That number one, developers will be able to develop houses where a 3-bedroom house goes for less than 3 million and a 1-bedroom house between 750 and 1 million shillings. My friend, that is a game changer. Now, what will happen? Let us see how that will affect, one, the owner's market, and two, the renter's market. Number one, if you can pay rent in a place where you are renting to own and you're trying to pay out 3 million shillings, no interest on it, you'll be paying between 10 and 15,000 shillings for a 3-bedroomed house. It's a game changer. What that would do is that it would create competition within the market. Your landlords will have to reduce their rates because their 3-bedroom and another 3-bedroom, someone is charging you 80,000, you can get it for 15. Which one are you choosing? You will choose 15,000. So that now, by sheer force of market forces, what would happen is there'll be more demand for the 15,000 3-bedroom house than there will be for the 80,000 3-bedroom house. In the grand scheme of things, if the government can afford to create affordable housing for us, our landlords will have to compete. Now, question, will our landlords lose out? No. Real estate is supposed to be a long-term investment. It should not be short-term. And the truth is, we need to create a market force that reduces the costs of rental incomes in this country for our landlords and reduces how much of your salary and how much of what you earn is paid to rent. It is not fair that someone earning 20,000 shillings a month should pay 10,000 shillings to stay in a dimly lit, stove-smelling or mena-smelling, burnt skumawiki smelling place. Instead, they should be able to pay 5,000 shillings for 20 years and own their house. That's what should happen. Second issue is the mortgage market. That's why one of the things that this conversation is missing is the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, where the rate of mortgages should move away from 20%, closer, in my view, to 4%, 3%, and I'll tell you why. When they give you a personal loan, all they have is your pay slip and your word to believe that you'll pay them back. When you get a car loan, this car could have an accident. But let me tell you, if you don't pay your mortgage, did the house die? Did it have cardiac arrest? Did it hit the other house by accident and now it is limping? No. A house is as secure a bet as you can get. Why our banks would charge us exorbitantly to own an asset they know is immovable and on top of that is not going to lose value is ridiculous to me. What should happen? What should happen is simple. The government should, one, build houses upon which the mortgage rate is low so that it forces banks to lower their mortgage rate. But more importantly, also, it should create a system where itself guarantees that this mortgage is not going to waste. Do you know why it's not going to waste? It's not going to waste because number one, it's a fixed asset. Number two, it is a long-term fixed asset that appreciates in value. There is no house, whether it's a mud house, brick house, that depreciates in value in this country. It is an appreciating fixed asset. If a bank sells you a house for 10 million today, in 5 years, that house, the market value is already 15 million. If you defaulted and the bank sold it for 15, it has made more than enough money. We need to stop robbing Kenyans with mortgages. So what needs to happen post haste is that the mortgage rate needs to come down. And that is the only reason why I support the financing of the housing bill. Yes, you heard me right, I do. If they use it to reduce the cost of rent and the cost of owning a house in this country, I agree with them. I'll tell you why. If they can reduce what you pay for rent from 30 to 50% to 10% and below, what is 3% out of your salary? Think about it. I would rather pay 3% out of my salary and reduce my rent by 50% than continue to pay 100% of what I pay every month. And this is the communication that is missing. The benefit of changing our housing market is not owning a house. It is simply supply and demand. The 3% should create an oversupply of 1 houses to own and 2 houses to rent. It will reduce the demand for expensive housing, forcing landlords, landowners, and banks to reduce their rates. Then the beneficiary is not just the person who gets a government house. It is every person who chooses to rent and every person who chooses to mortgage. The conversation should expand and change. The 18-year-old who left Form 4 and is doing Jengo and is paying 4,000 shillings for a house in Kibra or Mkuru kwa Njenga should be impacted by affordable housing. Not that he dreams to own a 1 million shillings house immediately, and I hope that he grows to be able to afford it. But in the short term, that rent should drop from 4,000 to 2,000. Then we're helping him. The person who started a job and is earning 30,000 and he has to pay 15,000 shillings in rent, should feel a reprieve by this housing plan by simply receiving 7,500 shillings reprieve in his rent because the government created houses that forced his landlord to reduce costs, or else his house stays empty. The person who hopes to own a house should not be pulling his hair out to own a house. If he is paying 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 shillings for rent, then that rent should be able to be converted to a mortgage without a change in the rent. If you told anyone in this city of Nairobi, or Mombasa, or Nakuru, or Kisumu, that he can pay the same amount of rent to own his house, sign me up. Sign me up. That's not true for a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old. It is true for all of us. If what we paid for rent was enough to get us a house, we would do it. So stop telling us just about the houses you're building. Tell us how the housing plan will change how much we pay for rent and how the mortgage markets will change. This has been 101 with Mark Bichachi, offering free advice to the government on how to sell the housing agenda.